So this is a video that I've talked about making for a little while now, and with some of the stuff that's been going on recently, one of the players in particular that moved over to the Saudi Pro League recently, this league keeps on getting more and more coverage, more and more hype. Every day it seems like there's a new star signing heading over there, and the dialogue around the league is kind of slipping away from the important stuff that's going on in the real world, and it really is.
The Saudi League is getting better. Next year will be even better. Step by step, I think this league will be the top 5 leagues in the world, but they need time, they need players, they need infrastructures. But I believe that this country have amazing potential, they have amazing people, and the league will be great, in my opinion.
I guess I'm worried that the sports washing is actually working. I feel like people really are blind to what's going on in places that maybe they're not living or not super familiar with. And so I've done some research. I want to just give you guys the facts. This is all just stuff that's facts, you know. I'm not going to be putting too much of my opinion in here, you know. It'll be sprinkled in a bit throughout, but this is really just a collection of information that I think paints, in my opinion, paints a picture of what's going on with the Saudi Pro League and Saudi investment in sport in general, because I think it's all quite a bit deeper than just football and just the pro league. I think that's one of the big elements to it at the moment, but this is definitely a very layered topic, and so I just kind of want to peel it back a bit by bit, and hopefully shed some light on everything that's going on. So I want to start by answering the question, what is the PIF? What is PIF? The Public Investment Fund is the sovereign wealth fund that is operated by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So this is kind of just political language for the bank account of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and more specifically the royal family. So I mean, it's not quite that simple. It's not like they're using this bank account in a traditional way like you and I. They don't go grocery shopping or, you know, pay bills, that regular type of stuff. But this is like an investment portfolio basically, where they've got different businesses, different ventures into different industries, where they're trying to use their money that they've gained from natural gas, from oil over the recent decades, and try and diversify that wealth pool basically. So this is an investment strategy more than anything. That's one thing that I want people to kind of understand. And this investment strategy isn't just simply, you know, like how, you know, you and I, again, might put money into a mutual fund or something like that. This is very different, to where they're not only looking to expand their financial portfolio, but also their influence and getting a seat at more tables, basically, around more influential people in different industries, and gaining more soft power behind the scenes. So I think in our world, in the football world, the most recent kind of big headlines around sports washing, and especially to do with Saudi investment, was about a year or so ago now, maybe 2 years ago now, when Newcastle were bought out by the Saudi government, and then now of course with the Saudi Pro League. And so I guess that is where my interest with it really kind of began. But as I said, this is a topic that goes a lot deeper than just football, and one example of that is 24 hours after it was announced that the PIF was going to be making an investment into the Saudi Pro League, which we'll discuss the details of that investment later. 24 hours after that investment was announced, it was announced that Live Golf was happening, and that they were going to be starting their own golf independent venture, which has now eventually, months down the line, after being a whole hardcore battle between PGA and Live, they have now merged and become one. So, you know, effectively over the course of a year or two, as this whole controversy has been going on between the PGA and Live, they won. You know, they bought golf. They bought the most historic, you know, golf league, I guess. I'm not a super big golf guy, but I know the PGA Tour is a big deal, and they got it. It's theirs now. So that is another big example, and I just thought the timing was fascinating to come right after their announcement of investing into the Pro League as well. They're also heavily invested into Formula One, which is another sport that I'm a big fan of, and You know, it's another one of those kind of weird, uncomfortable things for me where you see the Aramco sponsorships everywhere, and that's a Saudi-owned oil company, and they have a huge sponsorship deal with F1 that I believe is like a 10-year deal. And then they've also got a big investment into Aston Martin, I believe. I know that they also recently sold some stake that they held in McLaren. So, you know, multiple teams, and these are British teams, so, you know.
I am prepared to do what must be done. So early next year, we will introduce new legislation to make unambiguously clear that if you enter the UK illegally, you should not be able to remain here.
Multiple teams that were, you know, multiple teams on the grid that are very high profile, and they've got their investment in there. And then just with Formula One in general, they've got the whole Aramco sponsorship deal. So they're definitely heavily financially tied in with that. And then on top of that, of course, the obvious one is that they host the Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia every season. They've held some really high profile boxing matches, including title fights. And on the note of combat sports, they also have held some events with WWE recently and are going to be continuing to do that for, I believe, like a decade into the future. So that's a really long-term deal that they've signed there. Again, that's something that I'm a fan of, so it's a little awkward when I'm watching these events that are taking place in Saudi Arabia, and, you know, It's a tough one for sure. It's just a weird vibe around the events that take place over there. And I bring all of this up to say that wherever there is an international sport, and especially an international sport that's a little bit vulnerable financially, they're gonna capitalize. You know, if there's a price on something and they want it, they will reach that price. You know, they're acquiring entire sports and huge leagues and huge sports entertainment assets. Just whatever they seem to want, they are getting. And to wrap it back around with the Pro League, the same has now become true this transfer window where, you know, you've got aging stars that undoubtedly would still be getting offers from European clubs that could still definitely do a job at the highest level, but they're being bought out. You know, no one is able to match these salaries besides certain clubs in the Premier League. And so if you're not making it into a Champions League Premier League club, there's no one else that's really boxing with those salary offers. So it's a situation that I definitely don't see slowing down with the Saudi League. And so one kind of big piece of pushback I guess I've been seeing online a lot is as far as the why should we care argument. I've seen a lot of people saying, you know, the Premier League does the same thing to other leagues. You know, I just said that if you're not in the Premier League in the top 4, in the top 6, you're not really able to compete with these Saudi clubs and the wage packets they're offering. And so what's the difference between, you know, teams in England out-muscling the rest of Europe financially versus Saudi Arabia doing the same thing? So I think the easiest way for me to kind of explain where some of these problems lie is to kind of personalize it and tell you guys a story about people rather than just talking about these broad topics. So let me introduce you guys to Lina and Lujain Al-Hafloul. Lina and Lujain are sisters who live in Saudi Arabia. And Lujain specifically is a very high-profile activist and was instrumental in the Women to Drive movement, which is something that recently all kind of capitulated in Saudi Arabia, where women were somewhat given the right to drive in Saudi Arabia. Now, this was a very controversial topic in Saudi Arabia, and there was a lot of political turmoil leading up to this law change, I guess. And during that, Lujain was a very outspoken activist in favor of women being able to drive. And for her activism, she was jailed and tortured up until, I'm assuming, when the law changed and she was released. And although she's technically free, she's not allowed to leave the country of Saudi Arabia. And her sister Lina, that I mentioned earlier, is also living in exile due to all the controversy and chaos. Lina did an interview talking about the whole topic of sports washing, and during the interview, she said a quote that I think is really kind of poignant to everything that we're talking about, where Lina said, "I think the Saudi government, the Saudi regime, and MBS, he wants people to think of Ronaldo when they think of Saudi and not about Khashoggi." Now, for those of you who don't know, Jamal Khashoggi is a journalist who was murdered, I want to say like 4 years ago now. He was murdered at a Saudi Arabian consulate located in Turkey, and it's pretty much confirmed by both the Turkish and United States government that Khashoggi was murdered by the Saudi Arabian government per the orders of MBS. And for those of you who don't know, MBS is in reference to Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. Kind of like the boss. Another interesting quote I found in doing my research was from Simon Chadwick, who is a professor of sports and geopolitical economy at Schema Business School in Paris. He said, "What MBS and his advisors don't want is gangs of 26-year-old guys taking to the streets and plotting the overthrow of the royal family because they have to live their lives differently to the rest of the world. Essentially, what the government is now doing is saying, well, if you want Cristiano Ronaldo, we'll give him to you. But the flip side to that is they do not want to be questioned. So far this year, there have been more arrests of people in Saudi Arabia for posting negative comments about the government than ever before. The contract is you can have whatever you want, but don't question us." And I mean, with a country that has the human rights record of Saudi Arabia, I absolutely find it very alarming that they're using these flashy signings, they're using this big fancy soccer league as a way to, you know, push other things into the shadows and sweep other things under the rug. And that's definitely one really, this is something that's been annoying me a lot about the coverage of sports washing and all this, you know, stuff, from everything down from people like me on the internet all the way up to the big name journalist outlets and stuff. People who just gloss over this term, sports washing, without explaining like what is being washed. And that is something that I think is a really important missing link in this whole discussion. I did some research on actual tangible human rights examples of things that it's well agreed across many organizations that these are things that, to my personal standards, I'm not going to say anything else, but to my personal standards, I feel like it is absolutely wrong that things like this that I'm about to get into are happening still today in 2023. This is not from back in the day. This is right now today. The current government that is in power is doing this. So what I talked about earlier, the first thing that I have on this list was Jamal Khashoggi being assassinated in 2018. We already covered that. I'm not going to get too much into it, except for going deeper into the fact that Khashoggi was a very outspoken journalist who was doing a great job at covering the human rights issues and stuff that was going on in Saudi Arabia at the time. And that is unequivocally why he was murdered. He was speaking out against a corrupt government, and he was silenced with death. And it's despicable. It's absolutely despicable. And again, the reason why it's important to mention something that happened back in 2018 is because it is confirmed by the US and Turkish governments that MBS was connected, he was involved, he called the hit. And this is the very same Mohammed bin Salman that the media today is oftentimes praising as being a new generation of Saudi prince and a new generation of leader in the Middle East, where because of these flimsy women to drive laws and stuff that have been passed, he can act like and pose like he's some sort of progressive leader, when in reality, he's a murderer. That is what he is. He's no different than his predecessors. He is a murderer. And kind of going into that whole women to drive controversy, I hate that that has been a way for him to gain positive publicity in the Western media, because it is just not that simple as women are now allowed to drive. As far as all the research that I was able to do, it is still down to the man of the family to make that call for women in Saudi Arabia. So what that means is, technically, yes, women are now not restricted by their government from driving, but the government has still stated that they're going to side with the man of the family, whether that be the woman's father or husband or brother, whatever. If the man says you can't drive, you can't drive, and the government's not going to help you there. So can women really drive in a country where there are people on record saying that they believe that a majority of women still live in conservative families where they're not going to be able to fully take advantage of that? That was a quote from Hala Al-Dosari, and she's a Saudi scholar who said clear as day that a majority of women will not be able to take advantage of these changes. And it's not just murdering journalists, and it's not just stuff to do with women driving. There's a lot more issues than that, you know. Ask anyone from the LGBTQ community if they plan on visiting Saudi Arabia, because the answer is no. It is illegal to be gay in the country. It is illegal to be trans in the country, and the maximum punishment of that crime is death. They can kill you. They can kill you for being gay, or for being trans, or just for being a member of a non-traditional community. As far as your sexuality, you can be murdered by the government. I mean, It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And, you know, regardless of what your opinions are on, you know, LGBTQ rights, gay marriage, whatever the hell the controversy is, whatever the topic is, if you believe gay people can die for being gay and that's okay, you're wrong. You're just, that's as simple as that, you're wrong. Earlier this year, in fact, Saudi Arabia made headlines for welcoming all tourists, meaning apparently LGBTQ tourists, being welcomed into Saudi Arabia, and this allegedly because they saw data that gay couples tend to spend more money on vacationing. As if there's going to be gay couples going on vacation to a place where they could be murdered for. It's absolutely batshit to me. And the crazy thing is they're still not saying, oh yeah, no, come if you're gay, it's cool. They're just saying, don't disclose it. Basically, don't ask, don't tell. If you don't tell us you're gay, it's cool, but if it's public, if you put it out there, if there's public displays of affection and that stuff, who knows? They've still been very vague and unclear about that. So all people can travel there, but maybe we'll still arrest you and kill you if you're gay. And it's all the same thing as buying Cristiano Ronaldo to me. It's all just half-assed posturing, trying to play pretend like there's some sort of welcoming, you know, modern nation, when in reality they're still operating on morals that any decent society has progressed well beyond. And just to be clear, I'm not saying any decent society is in we all gotta go by the whole like Christian, Western, traditional bullshit. No, I have absolutely no problem with the Muslim religion and Muslim faith. It's the extremist use of it and the use of it to oppress women and oppress the LGBTQ community. If you want to do the traditional thing, if you want to do the respectful thing, I get it, but driving, dude? Fucking driving, dude? Existing and being gay? At a certain point, your religious beliefs, whatever you want to call it, like you can't walk up and shoot me in the face and I probably can't even say that on YouTube, damn. You can't come up and unalive me and then say, oh, it was because of my religious beliefs, and we're all just gonna be like, cool, you know, like, and obviously that's an extreme example, but that is to say that there are limits to where you can push that boundary of it's my religious beliefs. And in my opinion, not allowing women to conduct basic daily tasks such as driving and not allowing gay people to exist, this is clearly so far beyond the line, absolutely unacceptable, and I can't believe we're all playing pretend like these players don't have anything to answer for. And most of all these players, I really need to say something to Jordan Henderson, because I've never really liked this guy. I've always thought he was a little bit overrated, you know, as a player. And then the whole rainbow laces thing happened, and the way that he reacted and responded to something like that, I did gain some personal respect for him off of the pitch. You know, it seemed like he was an advocate for the genuine issues that affect people, and that he was standing up for something that was right in an environment where it's not necessarily common to see players speak up for LGBTQ rights and stuff like that. So it was a cool thing to see a high-profile player like Henderson speaking up on issues like this in a very progressive way. And now he's a Saudi Pro League player, and now he's taking a check. You know, this quote is a little bit long, but this is something that came from Jordan Henderson in a press release that he did about the whole Rainbow Laces campaign in 2021. And his words at the time seemed so honest and powerful, and now they just read as so empty. So I just need you to understand as I read this quote, this is a guy who just took the bag to go play in a country where it is illegal and punishable by death to be homosexual, to be a part of the LGBTQ community. Now let's look at what Jordan Henderson said 2 years ago. I do believe when you see something that is clearly wrong and makes another human feel excluded, you should stand shoulder to shoulder with them. You should have a responsibility to educate yourself better around the challenges they experience. That's where my own position on homophobia in football is rooted. Before I'm a footballer, I'm a parent, a husband, a son, a brother, and a friend to the people in my life who matter so much to me. The idea that any of them would feel excluded from playing or attending a football match simply for being and identifying as who they are blows my mind. The idea that they'd have to hide from it to be accepted, But that's exactly how too many members of the LGBT plus community feel. We know this because they tell us, so we should listen, support them, and work to make it better. Bullshit. Bullshit. You're out here saying you can't even bear the thought of people not being comfortable to go to a football game? What about going outside? What about going to the grocery store? You know? What about going to church? You know, I can't imagine how he's justifying this to himself. I doubt he'll ever address it publicly because I think, frankly, he's a spineless coward who would, you know, rather take the money and hide from the statements he's made and sell out all of the respect that the football community had for him, at least the progressive football community. And yeah, I just unbelievably disappointed in you, Jordan. You should be absolutely ashamed of yourself. And you know, of all the players to take this check, you know, it's a lot of money, I get it, but out of all the players to take this check, that stings, man. That stings, and you suck for that, dude. You suck. So now that we've kind of taken a whole look at sports washing as an idea, the specific reasons why they're doing it and why it's all kind of happening, how it's all been happening, now let's zoom in a little bit more on the football aspect of it, because that's what I'm most interested in as a football fan. So starting with the PIF specifically, that investment that I spoke about earlier on in the video where I was talking about their merger with Live Golf, that announcement that I was talking about was the PIF purchased 4 teams in the Saudi Pro League, just outright ownership of the teams. And so essentially, you know, it would be the same thing as the Queen of England. It would be the same thing as the Queen of England owning the top 4 in the Premier League. You know, like, it's obviously that's ridiculous, but that is the ridiculousness of what's happening here. The royal family owns the team that Ronaldo plays for, along with 3 of the other biggest teams in the league. So it seems like their strategy, I guess, for the time being is to try and get at least 3 stars per team in that big 4, and then littering some other stars throughout the rest of the league wherever they can, because they are in fact helping out some other clubs with some investment. Those 4 teams are just the 4 that they purchased outright. And you know, that's all great for the big stars of the league, you know, for Ronaldo and Benzema. They're gonna get their bag for sure. But who this isn't great for is your everyday player, you know, your second string left back on whatever team, you know, these guys who don't have a big name and big star power behind them. They are notorious for not paying those players in this league. In the last 12 months, FIFA have heard over 50 labor disputes with claims ranging from wages going unpaid when players are injured to things as bad as contracts just being torn up altogether. FIFA can, I'm sure, step in where possible, but it's definitely a risk as a player if you're not a big name star to go over and play in the Saudi Pro League. And who knows, maybe that even, you know, we haven't really seen, there hasn't been enough time yet to fully see, but maybe Benzema is going to come out in 6 months and say, yo, I haven't gotten paid. Like, it's all still very new, so we can't really say for sure. We can only go off the history of what they've done in the past, which it's sketchy with their player payment. So just to, I guess, kind of be fair to both sides, the Saudi Arabian government does have some sort of reasons for why they're investing so hard into the Pro League specifically. And those official reasons are to create investment opportunities, improve public health, and developing sporting infrastructures, which all on paper makes sense. And I think that that is a part of the reason. I'm sure that that is a positive externality of this project that they're a part of at the moment. But I just don't think that anyone that understands everything else I've been talking about in this video can honestly say that it's just that. You can't leave it at just that and really think that that's the reason why they're putting all of this money and investment into this league. There's definitely those deeper elements that we've been discussing. Overall though, despite all the financial backing, I'm really not too sure if this league is gonna succeed, at least to the level that, you know, people like Ronaldo are saying, where it's gonna be a top 5 league rivaling the Premier League and stuff like that. You know, you can't fake the culture. And that's something that MLS has had to learn the hard way. You know, there's very few clubs across the league that have developed a real fan culture, and that's had to happen over the course of 20, 30 years, you know. These new teams that just kind of pop up out of nowhere, it's different and you can feel it. You know, people genuinely don't care the same. I live in Southern California, and so I've been lucky enough to experience a lot of the culture around Liga MX around here, the Mexican league. And even living in California, I can tell that there's so much more history, culture, and passion behind that league south of the border than there is in MLS. And that's because of history. There's tradition that goes back decades and decades, and real rivalries and real history. And we just don't have that in the MLS. They didn't have it in China, and that's a big part of why that league failed, in my opinion. And Saudi Arabia is going to have to try and find a way to create that, you know. They do have I guess, a scenario that's kind of ripe for that football culture. You know, a huge portion of the population, I believe it's like 70%, is below the age of 35, which, you know, is a very young country for sure. And then obviously after beating Argentina in the opening match at the World Cup, big moment. So I'm sure, you know, football is definitely gaining steam in Saudi Arabia with the Saudi Arabian people, but I don't know if it's going to catch. You know, I don't know if it's going to ever be able to hit that same level that the Premier League is at. You know, that's a high bar that you're trying to reach at that point. Now, while that being said, there has been some short-term gains at the moment. You know, the league attendance is up like 140-something% since Ronaldo joined Al Nassr, which, you know, again, is it going to be short-lived? Only time will tell, but there is at least some sort of spark going off that could lead to a bigger flame down the line if this heat is sustained. I guess if that analogy makes sense. Now, on the flip side of that kind of pessimistic side of things, the reason why I do feel like this project does have a decent chance of success is Saudi Arabia is coming into this with a very clear plan, and it's long-term. They're not just thinking about the next couple of transfer windows. This is all a part of a bigger plan called Vision 2030, where they're basically trying to improve the entire infrastructure, global outlook, and everything of Saudi Arabia. From the articles I was reading online, they're investing 7 trillion, I think it was dollars, who cares about the currency, 7 trillion somethings into the sporting and all this other, you know, investment stuff. And so they've got a huge bankroll, bigger than the Chinese money. I promise you, they have a huge bankroll. And they've got plans going long-term into the future. They really want that World Cup in 2030. And I think there's a really good chance they can get it. And at that point, they're just building and building and building towards that major event. You know, as much as we all, you know, I won't say we all, but as much as a lot of the footballing community had a lot of negative things to say about the Qatar World Cup leading up to it, as far as how it was thrown together and everything like that, we all watched. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like the numbers were down or anything like that. It's still, as far as Qatar is concerned, went over as a huge success. Now imagine that happening, but with a league that's been around for over almost 10 years with superstar players and everything like that. You know, there's gonna be more of a culture around it. It's just, it all makes sense. Like, they're actually building towards a tangible event, and they have a real plan of how they want to get to that level and status in the footballing community. And so I don't know, it feels like a real project with a real plan and real thoughts put into it that has some legs, and it's working so far. Just today, as I was getting ready to record this, I saw a here we go for Riyad Mahrez. So, you know, it's all happening. They're pushing for these moves, man, and it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough to call it for sure. We are just gonna have to wait it out, because ultimately we're powerless. You know what I mean? And that's definitely the final thoughts that I had that I wanted to share here is, despite everything that we've talked about today, despite all of these clearly, in my opinion, wrong elements of everything that's happening over here, I do understand that we're powerless in these situations. You know, the money and the power that is at play is much beyond my influence. And so, you know, as I said earlier, when the things that I'm a fan of, whether that be Formula One, WWE, or now apparently football, when those things are in Saudi Arabia, I know I'm supporting, by extension, the Saudi Arabian government and everything. I don't boycott. I'll be honest. Like, I just can't be asked to put myself through missing out on things that I care about because of things that are ultimately out of my control. Now, if somehow we could all mobilize and all boycott everything that's bad in the world that makes bad people money, it'd be great. But, you know, I'm wearing Nike right now. They've got their own, you know, like, it's all impossible to not be a part of these negative influences and these ultra rich, ultra powerful groups that are doing bad things to people that don't deserve it. And what are we to do? So I know that's a little deep and philosophical, but I say all that because I get kind of annoyed when a lot of people talk about this stuff that agree with me that sports washing is bad and the Saudi Arabian government is bad and all this stuff, but at the same time, they like have this condescending tone about it where it's like, oh, you're supporting, you wear PSG jerseys, oh, get out of my face, you're supporting the Qatari government or the Saudi, like whatever, you know. I can't fully agree with that mentality of, you know, if it's supporting something that like this, you know, one of these sports washing endeavors, that we should bear the responsibility of that as fans, and we need to take that on head on. The best I can say is that we should stay educated. We should understand what's going on at least. We should know why these things are wrong. We should understand the controversies behind it, and to the best of our abilities, be vocal and supportive of things that we disagree with. You know, for me personally, that means that if Qatar buys out Manchester United, the club that I'm a fan of, I'm gonna have to get educated on what's going on in Qatar as far as the human rights issues, because that's what I feel compelled to do. And then advocate in my personal life, whatever ways I can, but I'm not gonna try and take away the things that give people joy in such a difficult and shitty world as it is. Like, no one on our side of the fence should be having to suffer and miss out on things because of the actions of people out of our reach. You know what, that's my personal feelings on this, and that's where I wanted to wrap things up, because despite this being kind of a negative video overall as far as the Saudi Pro League, I'll watch games, I guess, if they come on and stuff. Like, I'm not against the idea. It's just gonna feel weird, you know, just like when I'm watching the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, or, you know, Backlash earlier this year. I think that was that, whatever the hell the event, the WWE event was earlier this year in Saudi Arabia. Like, when I'm watching this stuff, I feel awkward, honestly. But again, like, if I got free time and there's a race on, I'm not gonna not watch it just because of where it is. What does Eli change? You know? So I don't know. I guess there is no perfect solution, there is no perfect answer, but I guess that's where we are. You know, that's why I wanted to try and keep this video to mostly the facts, because all we can do is try and better understand the world around us and influence our own little bubble in the positive ways that we can. But yeah, that is my thoughts on sports washing, I guess, and just the whole topic of the Saudi Pro League and everything that's been going on. I'm gonna keep covering it, you know, I'm gonna keep covering the transfers and stuff that happen, and I'm gonna keep congratulating these players who get their money, even if it is through gritted teeth in a way, because it's again one of those things where I feel bad for asking the players to turn down generational wealth just for the sake of, you know, making a statement. Now, that being said, when it comes to players like Henderson specifically, I feel like that's different, because he chose to cross that line in the first place. You know, he chose to become an advocate and then back out when he could get a bag. So that's different. That is different. But for these dudes who just play football, bro, like, hey, man. If you guys actually made it to the end of what's probably going to be my longest ever video so far on this channel, I truly appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. Like, genuinely, the support that I've been getting recently has been so uplifting and so heartwarming. And so I just want to thank every single one of you guys that bothers to spend your time with me, because you could be watching anything in the world right now, but you're sitting here watching me. So thank you. If you're seeing this right now, thank you, for real. And that's all I got for y'all today.
Mahaba, Ana Stephen Gerrard. Ana El Etifaki. See you soon.